And welcome once again to Fox Sports Lab NFL. I'm Matthew Campbell, and I'm joined by Jaymz Clements. Jaymz, round one, as every week in the NFL, we know there's so many stories to come out of it. The Chiefs are rusty at the start. They cost you your multi. We had Tua versus Herbert in the scorefest. But the talking point was the Jets. Extraordinary circumstances when Aaron Rodgers runs out with the American flag, and in a few minutes later, he's down and out for the season. And the Jets won.
I mean, many would make a joke about how, I don't know, this could be something about something American supremacy, 4 plays in, Matty, it all comes apart, away we go. But that was crazy, wasn't it? Like watching Aaron Rodgers run out there with the flag, it's this huge moment, and then they hit the field, and then he hits the field, and he stays there. It is absolute chaos for the Jets and the Jets fans from here on out. But it was a lot of football in week one. We learned a bit, and I think I'm just going to urge some caution. Week one was chaos, Matty, and week two is set up to be an absolute belter, though.
So what were the positives for you week one? And then on the reverse side, we'll come back, and what were the negatives?
Well, I think what I learned from this week one, and like in terms of the good stuff, is don't bet on rookie quarterbacks. We knew that. That played out perfectly. You don't bet on rookie quarterbacks in week one of their first NFL season. The other one is probably the defenses. You can rely on them just a little bit more than some offenses, right? We saw the Niners absolutely throttle your beloved Steelers. We saw Dallas put the absolute smackdown on New York. And it was literally because their defenses were absolutely staunch. Even the Patriots, like that defense kept them in that game against the Eagles, even though the Eagles eventually won and covered. But I think that's the biggest sort of thing that we sort of came out with, right? That's the learning moment where you go, defenses still good. But the biggest surprise for me, Matty, was how bad the Seattle Seahawks looked. That was horrible.
And it cost us our multi.
Absolute gouge out your eyes territory, that one. But also the Rams. Like the flip side of that game was the fact that they look vaguely competent is one of those ones where you put it in the back of the old brain and you steer clear of it, because I reckon they'll look horrible in week two and probably from here on out. That's the surprise one. You've always got to steer clear. But in terms of that, in big surprises, like the Jets to lose Aaron Rodgers in literally their first sequence it's shocking and it's brutal. And we could also turn that around and have that as no surprise though, Matty, because he's a 40-year-old QB and this is what happens sometimes, right?
Yeah. It was interesting watching the Rams. Sometimes they cross their coach, Sean, and he looked surprised they were actually scoring. But anyway, let's get to Thursday night football. We've got the Eagles, who came up, it did pretty well just to beat the Pats 25-20. The Vikings went down to the Bucks. How do you see this playing out Thursday night footy?
This is an interesting one. So Friday morning, we'll see a lot about this Eagles team that we'll need to know sort of further into the season, right? Like they dealt with some injuries in that Pats game, and the Vikings, if you want to talk about, no surprises, big surprises, bad surprises, the Vikings were also horrible in that loss to Tampa Bay. And these two teams actually played in week 2 last year. And this is my key in on this game here, Matty. It's the simple idea is that the Vikings couldn't contain running QBs last year. They gave up, I think, across their 5 games against, the top flight running quarterbacks, they gave up at least 35 yards and usually a touchdown. So Jalen Hurts last year ran rampant. I reckon you can go for a touchdown for him as well. And they do have a new defensive coordinator there in Minnesota, but I just don't know if they've got the personnel. So I think if we're going to go for a same-game multi for not Browns Steelers, if we're going to go for a same-game multi, obviously, for the Friday game, we're going to go Vikings at Eagles. Philly at home, I think this goes under. This was a really low-scoring affair last year. So the under's 49.5. Even with the injuries, most would probably think that we might have a bit of a score fest. I just don't know if the Vikings will be able to keep up with the Eagles. I think we'll see A.J. Brown get a touchdown. I think Hurts will run one in himself, and I'd go over his 34.5 yards. And I'm probably going to land with the Eagles minus 6.5 points at the line. I think they're just a way better team than the Vikings, even with the injuries. I think the Vikes will take a little bit to put this together. And it's sort of like a similar vibe that I have on Cincinnati. I think when you have a lot of turnover in the offseason, you've got to give yourself the first 4 weeks of the season to really understand where you're at. I think that's where the Bengals are at. I think that's where Minnesota are at.
All right, so we're around Jalen Hurts for the Eagles to get that multi going on Friday morning. Sunday night footy, or Monday morning for us, is a couple of really important games. The Chiefs, how they bounce back against Jacksonville. The Ravens and Cincinnati, you just mentioned whether Cincinnati can get that defense going. Joe Burrow didn't throw for a touchdown. But the late game, our TV game, is a beauty. It's the Dolphins at New England.
That game is absolutely chaos because you've got, an immovable object, I guess, of the Patriots defense, Bill Belichick trying to slow down Tua. I can't wait to see how this unfolds. I think it's going to be absolutely unreal. Tua for MVP. That's where I'm landing, Matty. Let's go Tua. If he makes it past week 2, we'll see what happens. But
he's just got to play 17 games.
That's all we need out of him, I think. He's on pace for 3,000 million passing yards at this point. Tyreek Hill's on for 3,000 receiving yards. But for a Monday multi for the overnight games, I'm going to steer clear of the KC Jacksonville game because it's just Jacksonville taught us a little bit. KC looked a bit scratchy. And you talked about that Bengals game. I don't want any bar of Ravens Bengals because I think the Bengals will bounce back and probably win that. But they looked horrible last week. And that Baltimore thing, they're dealing with a lot of injuries. I'd say the Bengals win that. But for a multi for across that Monday morning slate, I'm going to take Indy minus 2.5 over Houston. I'll take Atlanta over Green Bay plus 2.5. Green Bay are a bit of a sneaky team. I like the look of them, but Atlanta were really good and they're at home. I'm going to go on home underdog plus 2.5 for Atlanta. Detroit to keep their winning ways up, Matty, minus 5.5 over Seattle. And the Bears plus 1.5 in Tampa. I think that's another sneaky one where the Bears didn't look very good against Green Bay. Tampa looked pretty good against the Vikings. I'm going to go a contrary play and have that as my 4-leg multi.
I love how you got 2 teams in the multi that cost us last week. A bit of retribution there from Jaymz Clements. Let's go to Monday Night Footy. 2 games of Monday Night Footy. You got Derek Carr, who got the Saints up and over. They're playing the Panthers. And the Browns are at Pittsburgh. And you talked about how good the 49ers were against my Steelers. They just took them apart. The Browns weren't bad.
I think this is the thing when it comes to the Browns. Like, what they did last week was just go, oh, hang on a second. It doesn't really matter how bad our QB is. And Deshaun Watson was not very good. Their defense. This is what I hit on at the start there, Matty. Their defense is immense. They're big. They're fast. They're terrifying. I also like the Steelers defense. So I think for this Browns-Steelers game, we're going to definitely go the under. The under's 39.5. I like so your man, George Pickens, he had a classic, that was an incredible almost catch, but he was out of bounds, which is the Pickens special there, Matty. I reckon he actually gets in for one in this game because if there's anything that you can sort of do on this Browns defense, I feel like Pickett's going to have to throw it to Pickens. So Pickett to Pickens, I think we're going to have a touchdown for Pickens. Nick Chubb, I think, gets in for a TD as well. And you'll see the Browns, I think, just eke out like basically a field goal win. So the line is 2.5 at the moment. I'd take the Browns minus 2.5. So I'd go the under, a Pickens touchdown, a Nick Chubb touchdown, and the Browns to cover that minus 2.5 line.
Yeah, he's got to go to Pickens more with Johnson out with a hamstring injury, not playing. So he should get plenty of opportunities. All right, mate, that's it for this week. We'll take those multis down. We'll write them down. We'll get them both right this week, or at least a couple anyway. And we'll talk to you next week for round 3.
Awesome. My pleasure, Matty. Here's to an awesome week too. Hopefully you don't get tripped up on any just one legs in the multis again.
Someone over there's got a Seattle t-shirt on. Get it off. That's Jaymz Clements. I'm Matthew Campbell. This has been Fox Sports Lab NFL.
Imagine what you could be buying instead. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.